We have a small problem. They've reopened the X-Files.
Hey Marvelous viewers, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be talking about 10 horrific X-Files episodes based on true stories. Let's get into it. The 90s were quite an era for horror, especially on television, and the X-Files has to be at the top of that list. Anyone who grew up watching this show would remember having at least one sleepless night after watching it. I know it's difficult to point out the scariest episode, but we do have an easier category for this list. The most horrific X-Files moments based on true events. Let's begin.
Mulder, she already is home. It's Mrs. Peacock.
Home. Season 4, Episode 2. Glenn Morgan and James Wong were known for their prolific writing and production of some of the most famous early X-Files episodes. For me, they kinda made X-Files what it is. However, the duo left the show after the second season, and Home was set to mark their return. Now, obviously, they wanted to come back with a bang, and thus created one of the most shocking episodes in the series. Morgan and Wong based the story on some real events, but before I tell you guys how the incidents tied into the story, here's a quick look at the plot. In a small Pennsylvania town called Home, a woman gave birth to a deformed baby who was buried by 3 similarly deformed men near their rundown house. Once, some children discovered the corpse while playing. FBI special agents and a medic, Fox Mulder and Dana Scully, arrived on the scene to run an investigation. The local sheriff filled them in, and we got to know that the house belonging to the Peacocks had been standing since the Civil War era, without any proper amenities. Weirdly enough, they were also known for inbreeding ever since the war. It's soon discovered that the baby was buried alive and that its parents were Peacock family members. They had to have a woman somewhere because of biology, and when Mulder and Scully broke into their house, wait for it, they found a quadruple amputee hidden under the bed. I swear to God, I didn't look under my bed for a couple weeks after this. She turned out to be none other than Mrs. Peacock, the mother of the 3 boys. It's easy to connect the dots. They've been inbreeding all this time, and hence the deformities. Dramatic action sequences ensue only for Mrs. Peacock and her eldest son to escape, in the hope of starting a new family somewhere else. Sweet Home Alabama. Morgan and Wong drew from the 1992 documentary Brother's Keeper, about 4 Ward's brothers living in rural isolation who got international recognition after one of them, Delbert, allegedly killed another Ward's member. They chose to incorporate their farm life into the script. The other real-life influence came from a story in Charlie Chaplin's autobiography, in which he recalled being introduced to a disfigured legless man. Morgan, however, misremembered the tale and believed the boy to be totally limbless. He then used parts of his story in the screenplay for Home, and the misremembrance only creeped viewers out even more.
Not again.
Paper Hearts, Season 4, Episode 10. This episode was our monster before Netflix happened. It revolved around the murder of a young girl by a serial killer, John Lee Roche, who was known to have killed 13 other girls throughout the 80s. His modus operandi included cutting out a heart from each victim's clothing. An edgy investigation started, and soon the FBI figured out that Roche had been killing even before the FBI knew of him. They also linked Roche to all those mysterious abductions, which were initially thought to be done by aliens. Yes, aliens were a huge part of the X-Files. You'll understand that in the later ones too. The episode also established a personal connection between Mulder and the murderer, with the former realizing that Roche might have been behind his sister's kidnapping. He never really got the answer, but in a high-tension climax, shot Roche dead in the head. The story might sound like old wine in a new bottle, but trust me, developing it was far more intriguing than it appears. Written by Vince Gilligan. Yes, surprise, surprise, Gilligan wrote quite a few X-Files episodes. The story was curated for Roche's character. Gilligan then incorporated the story's longest-running plotline, the kidnapping of Samantha Mulder, and made an entire episode on the question of whether Samantha was abducted by some extraterrestrial being or murdered by a child killer. Gilligan even sprinkled a little bit of his own life into the episode. The dream sequence where Mulder saw laser lights was based on Gilligan's experience with laser holograms as a film student. Oh man, I'll never stop fanboying about this genius. However, the most prominent inspiration for Roche came from the killer of boys, Dean Corll. Corll was a notorious serial murderer who slaughtered boys across Houston, Texas, and had 2 accomplices. One of them shot Corll dead, leading to a police investigation and the discovery of dozens of dead bodies. At one point, the police stopped looking, but there were several other missing kids tied to Dean Corll, similar to how Mulder could never know who Roche's last victim was. I don't want to get into the whys and hows of the investigation, but if you're intrigued enough, go look up Dean Corll.
Evil he will see.
Fresh Bones, Season 2, Episode 15. Fresh Bones was directly based on the tragic incident of a number of US military personnel killing themselves while stationed in Haiti. Yeah, that actually happened. In 1994, during Operation Uphold Democracy in Haiti, an increasing number of suicide reports among military men started circulating. It prompted authorities to dispatch a stress combat team, yet the body count in Haiti was unusually high when compared to other longer operations at the same time. The real reason behind the deaths was shrouded in mystery, which caused many to link Haitian voodoo practices to the suicides. I understand the reality lies in mental health issues, isolation, and defense administration, but for the sake of thrill, the writers of Fresh Bones gave it a chiller twist. Howard Gordon wrote the episode Fresh Bones after reading 2 detailed articles about this massacre and researching Haitian zombification rituals rooted in folklore. To talk a little about the episode, it focused on the apparent suicide of Marine Jack McAlpin in Folkestone, North Carolina. This was the second suicide among the troops guarding Haitian refugees. Hold on, where did the refugee plot come from? Simply because they could not shoot in Haiti. An autopsy of McAlpin revealed that his body had been replaced with a dog's, suggesting a link to Haitian zombification practices. Why a dog, man? Leave the fur babies alone. The voodoo practices were emphasized in great detail in the episode, and ended with Wharton, the colonel, being unknowingly buried alive. Gordon took a completely sinister turn to these otherwise explainable deaths, but hey, it was a fun watch.
Only this is the first time I've ever seen it on a human being.
Eve, Season 1, Episode 11. This one was really creepy. A jogging couple found their neighbor's daughter, Tina, standing dazed in the driveway, only to discover her father was dead in the yard with 2 incisions on his neck. That too sitting on the swing. The FBI was called in immediately, and soon it became clear that there was another death, exactly like this one. But here's the catch. The 2 deaths were separated by some 1,000 miles. Further complicating the situation, they found another girl, Cindy, in the second death scene, who looked identical to Tina. In a shocking revelation, we learned that both these girls were conceived through in vitro fertilization at the same San Francisco clinic. If you're smelling something fishy, you're absolutely right. Enter the main culprit, a doctor named Sally Kendrick, who worked there and was fired for unauthorized genetic experiments. Hold your breath because the truth is horrifying. Kendrick was actually part of a highly classified military program known as the Super Soldier Cloning Program. This program created genetically enhanced boys, known as Adams, and girls, the Eves. The clones did have extremely high intelligence, but at the cost of homicidal tendencies. In conclusion, identical young girls and boys were running loose on a murder spree. Tina and Cindy, however, were not directly created by Kendrick. Rather, a particular Eve created them using her own DNA. And of course, these little devils killed their fathers. In the end, they were put in a psychiatric facility, only to be potentially freed by another clone. It doesn't take an Einstein brain to figure out that the episode was heavily inspired by the MK Ultra project and other such secret military genetic experiments. Well, they're no longer secrets, so I guess we can talk about them. Anyway, so the MK Ultra was a CIA project between 1950 and 1970, which used illegal human experiments to develop mind control techniques. I'm sure there are several such hidden experiments that you might link to the story, but this one happened to be on the top of my head. Do keep adding to the list. Fearful Symmetry, Season 2, Episode 18. The episode did not receive the best reviews, and critics called it an ambitious mess, but personally, I would give it credit for dealing with intense themes. Fearful Symmetry was a brilliant commentary on the realities of animal captivity. It further delved into the rise of the animal rights movement in the mid-90s, which advocated for their freedom. Indeed, writer Steve DeJarnett put in some alien lore and UFO sightings to establish the core mystery, and let's be honest, to make it more palpable for X-Files fans. The alien part can be attributed to the Chupacabra legend, which tried to link unexplained deaths of farm animals to extraterrestrial forces. The story was simple, an invisible elephant wreaking havoc in the city before suddenly dying. This led to our special agents arriving on the scene to examine the damage and a series of other animal disappearances at the Farfield Zoo. Meanwhile, the activist movement was woven directly into the storyline, and the episode ultimately closed by reiterating the idea of some alien conservationist scheme at work. The episode was genuinely upsetting, throwing light on the plight of caged animals. However, the main story that seemed to have influenced the elephant's plotline is Tyke's rampage in Honolulu. In 1994, Tyke, a circus elephant, went out of control, injured its handler, and ran freely on the streets for 30 minutes before being shot down. This wasn't the first time Tyke threw a tantrum. The wild beast went off the rails twice in 1993 and caused some serious damage, but we all know how mercenary minds work. Another similar incident preceded Tyke's. It occurred at the Great American Circus in Palm Bay, Florida in 1992. A female elephant, Janet, went rogue and stampeded through the circus grounds while giving a ride to a mother and her kids. Janet, too, had to be killed by the police. Jarnett combined these events with a concerning decline in the populations of moose, stellar sea lions, and porcupines in the 90s, And there you go, fearful symmetry was ready to be served. The UFO sightings may be a stretch, yes, but the episode hinting at illegal animal trafficking and captivity that existed was rightly brought to the public's attention, albeit in an unusual way. Paperclip, Season 3, Episode 2. We all know about Operation Paperclip now. It was a real Cold War-era project where the US secretly recruited scientists, some even former Nazis. The motive? To advance the country's weaponry, particularly to strengthen its place in the space race. The scheme ran from 1939 to 1945, and it's still an extremely controversial topic. The episode was quite literally named after this covert operation and highlighted the unsettling legacy of such defense programs. Once again, we got extraterrestrial activities linked to the government, but the truth revealed how dangerous mankind has been. The special agents find themselves entangled in a larger conspiracy in the context of Operation Paperclip. Good thing Mulder and Scully reunited in this episode, but it wasn't the best reunion. I mean, finding vaccination records and genetic samples for alien-human hybrids cannot exactly be a happy meeting. Occupational hazard. But yeah, that's about it. A long-ass investigation led to the discovery of a Nazi scientist, Victor Klemperer, and the Strughold mining facility, which was the base for these illegal activities. Finally, the episode climaxes further, stating that the truth always lies in the X-Files. Also, it's not exactly a spoiler, but a pretty big shock. Mulder's dad was a part of Operation Paperclip. Oops.
What men?
Nisei, Season 3, Episode 9. Okay, this one was a banger, and honestly one of my favorites. Yes, we got an alien-based episode once again, but this time it was a lot more intriguing. A group of Japanese scientists found an alien body. Yes, a whole body, and taped the autopsy. However, the researchers were killed by a strike team. When Mulder found the tape, he believed it in an instant, but Scully was doubtful. Understandable. Even the FBI doesn't come across an alien post-mortem every day. Next, they found a list of members and satellite images from the Mutual UFO Network, and bingo. Scully realized that there were several other women with similar implants like hers, and that all are dying from cancer. Wait, it gets even more complicated. Mulder, on the other hand, had discovered the real identity of the Japanese scientists. They were members of Unit 731 during World War II, who the US government tasked with deploying hybrids. So the alien body wasn't really an alien, it was a test subject. Scully, too, was an involuntary part of this experiment. Now for the actual life event, Unit 731 did exist, known as the Manchu or Kamo Detachment. It was to advance biological and chemical warfare. The unit was run by the Imperial Japanese Army, and over thousands died in their facility. But the Truman government granted immunity to certain key members in exchange for their research data. Nisei sowed seeds that such experiments might very well exist even today in some corner of the world. I gotta dig up Area 51 again. The Erlenmeyer Flask, Season 1, Episode 24. It was the first season's finale, and they had to close with a bang. They managed to do so thanks to some newspaper headlines. Writers Alex Gansa and Howard Gordon were fascinated by news about Gloria Ramirez, popularly known as the Toxic Lady. She was a cancer patient who baffled the staff of the Riverside General Hospital in 1994. In an inexplicable manner, the ER medics fell ill after being exposed to her blood. Now, it might have been due to some chemical reaction. I'm not even trying to get there because chemistry, dude. Nope, not my forte. Anyway, the point is, it remains one of the biggest medical mysteries to date. The writers loved the idea of including something similar in the episode. Now let's check out what happens in the Erlenmeyer Flask. Mulder found a flask labeled Purity Control and a kind of bacteria that had no existence on Earth. Soon, they learned that the person behind the suspicious flask was a man named Dr. William Sekar. And guess what? When William died, his blood turned out to be green, and he also emitted poisonous gas when poked with a needle. Basically, the X-Files gave us the answer to Gloria's condition and implied that it must have been extraterrestrial. Man, they were a little too obsessed with the aliens, huh?
Oh my god! Dog, please let me out of here!
Tunguska, Season 4, Episode 8. Even if you were horrible at history, you'd still have a faint idea about the Tunguska event. It was this huge explosion of tons of TNT equivalent that shook people in Russia. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, eyewitnesses claim that they saw at least 3 people die due to it. A meteor burst is often cited as the trigger for this explosion, and the incident is considered the largest impact on Earth. The 2-part X-Files episode, namely Tunguska and Terma, were directly ripped off from this historical occurrence, where Mulder and Scully came across a weird black substance. Linking it to the event, it was said to be from a meteorite, but as I said, their obsession with the extraterrestrial could have made Ridley Scott insecure. Of course, this substance too apparently had alien origins, placing the entire Tunguska event in the context of otherworldly happenings. Well, I can't really blame the makers of this episode for bringing in the alien bit because the event did get such fictional interpretations. Notable among them was Alexander Konstantev's short story Explosion, published in 1946. There was another influence on this episode, the writings of Nobel Prize winner Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Mainly his book, The Gulag Archipelago, was used to create the episode's Gulag design. Duane Barry, Season 2, Episode 5, Alien Abduction. Yup, we have once again. This man named Duane Barry was kidnapped by aliens in 1985, and then 9 years later, Barry turned out to be a violent patient in a mental hospital. And by violent, I mean he did some really scary shit. Attacked a security guard, stole his gun, and took a doctor hostage. The reason? He desperately wanted to return to the site of abduction, hoping the aliens would take the doc instead of him. Mulder got called in to act as a hostage negotiator, and did manage to free Dr. Hockey. Scully, on the other hand, did the better part of the job. She revealed that Barry was shot in the head in 1982, and it had damaged his frontal cortex. It was because of this brain injury that Barry became a psychopath and a pathological liar. However, Mulder was inclined to believe the alien kidnapping story, while Scully tried to find a more rational reason behind Barry's actions. This continued throughout the episode, only for Scully to be attacked by a runaway Barry. Yeah, it did lead to a continuation episode, but the point is, Duane Barry was not a completely fictional character. Psychological peeps, give me a shout out. Duane Barry was pretty much a copy of Phineas Gage. Gage was a railroad construction worker who once met with a horrible accident. A large iron rod was driven through his head, destroying parts of his brain. Ever since, Gage has not been the same person. Once a polite and kind person, Gage now had a disfigured face and became irritable. His friends would say that he was no longer the Gage they once knew. Duane Barry was Chris Carter's version of Phineas Gage. Marvelous verdict. Alright guys, that's all for today. Yes, the X-Files did color the stories and present them in much more exciting commercial forms. But oh boy, they handled some of the serious topics. The series showed that ghosts are not the only thing that can make your nightly bathroom visits uncomfortable. Real human actions are even more horrifying. Personally, I've always been terrified by the dangers of chasing power, and these episodes just prove me right. Serial killers, human experiments, incest. The X-Files unveiled the real monsters hiding in plain sight. Let us know your thoughts about these episodes in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!